Chapter 1. The Last Dollar. The saloon doors groaned as Elias Boone pushed them open, the scent of whiskey and smoke clinging to the air like an old grudge. Spurs clinked with every step he took across the warped floorboards, and the hum of chatter slowed just enough for a few heads to turn his way. They always did. Folks knew a man down to his last dollar when they saw one. Worn boots, sun-battered hat, eyes that carried more dust than hope. Elias laid a silver coin on the bar, the last one he had to his name. It glinted weakly under the lantern light, before vanishing into the barkeep's thick hand. "Mail's come in," the barkeep muttered, sliding a folded letter toward him. "Stagecoach tomorrow. She'll be on it." The word traveled quick through the room. Laughter sparked from a table of ranch hands playing cards. "Boone's buy himself a bride," one drawled, spitting tobacco into a tin. "Ain't that something? Spend his last coin on a woman he ain't never laid eyes on." Another joined in, voice dripping with mockery. "Hope she ain't cross-eyed, Boone. Or worse, hope she ain't got more teeth than sense." Elias ignored them, tucking the letter into his coat. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. Better to gamble on a woman than rot alone with cattle for company. He tipped his hat to the barkeep and turned back toward the door. Outside, the evening air struck cooler, scented with sagebrush carried by the wind off the plains. The horizon burned in shades of orange and crimson as the sun sank low, throwing long shadows across the dusty street. Elias leaned against the hitching post, his horse shifting restlessly beside him. His fingers brushed the brim of his hat as if to hold down the thoughts storming in his mind. He hadn't planned life this way. Once, he dreamed of building something with his own two hands, a ranch worth handing down, a family waiting at the table. Instead, years of bad luck and harder winters had stripped him bare, leaving only that single coin and a desperate hope that this bride might bring light to the loneliness. He heard boots scuffing behind him. Old Sheriff Tate ambled over, pipe smoke curling from his lips. "Boone," the sheriff said, steady and low. "You sure about this? A woman bought on paper don't always match the picture." Elias gave a dry chuckle, eyes fixed on the sunset. "A picture's better than an empty chair. Maybe she'll hate the dust. Maybe she'll hate me. But I'd rather take the chance than keep talking to ghosts." The sheriff studied him for a long moment, then clapped him on the shoulder. "God help you, son. Sometimes chance is all we got." As the coyotes began to cry in the distance, Elias tightened the reins and stared down the road where the stagecoach would arrive come dawn. The last dollar was gone. All he had left now was waiting. Chapter 2. A House of Secrets. The stagecoach rattled to a stop in a storm of dust, its wheels screeching against the dry earth. Elias stood on the boardwalk, hat pulled low against the morning sun, his pulse beating louder than the horse's snorts. Men leaned against posts and railings, eager for the show. A bride bought and paid for the last coin wasn't an everyday sight, and tongues wagged as freely as the whiskey that fueled them. The door creaked open. A small, gloved hand appeared first. Then a slender figure stepped down onto the street. Clara. She wore a faded blue dress, neat but tired, and carried a single satchel like all she owned in the world could fit in it. Her eyes, wide and searching, landed on Elias. For a heartbeat, the town disappeared. The jeers, the creaking saloon sign, even the dust that hung heavy in the air. She looked at him as though she'd stepped into another life she wasn't sure she wanted. Elias swallowed hard, nerves rough in his throat. He removed his hat, bowing his head slightly. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm Elias Boone. Reckon I'm the one you've come for." Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she gave a small nod, clutching her satchel tighter. A ranch hand muttered from the steps of the saloon, "Ain't much to look at. Hope she's worth the price." Laughter followed, but Elias felt the sting sharper than any blade. He straightened, his voice carrying across the street. "She's worth more than any coin I had." Then he reached for her satchel, ignoring the chuckles, and guided her toward his waiting horse and wagon. The ride out to the ranch stretched long and quiet. Prairie wind swept across golden fields, the scent of sun-baked sage drifting between them. Elias stole glances at her, her pale hands folded in her lap, the way her eyes lingered on the endless sky, as though trying to read its secrets. "You'll find a humble," he said at last, breaking the silence. "A roof that don't always hold in the rain, but it keeps out most of the cold. Land's rough, but it feeds a man if he works hard enough." Clara turned her gaze on him, her voice soft, cautious. "I'm not afraid of work, Mr. Boone." He smiled faintly. "Then we'll make do." When the ranch finally came into view, a squat cabin framed by weathered fences and a handful of cattle, Clara's expression flickered. Relief, perhaps, or disappointment. Elias couldn't tell. He helped her down from the wagon, their hands brushing for the first time. She stiffened, pulling back quickly, as though guarding something deep inside. Elias noticed. He didn't press. The prairie stretched wide and unforgiving around them, but as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in fire, Elias thought maybe, just maybe, this woman might bring warmth to a place long gone cold. Yet even as she stepped into his home, her eyes lingered on the horizon, carrying secrets the wind couldn't scatter. Chapter 3. Truth Under a Blood-Red Sky. The day had bled itself dry. The prairie burned red under a sinking sun, and Elias Boone wiped the sweat from his brow as he stacked the last bale of hay in the barn. His horse whinnied low, uneasy, as though it sensed a storm neither wind nor cloud foretold. Behind him, the barn door creaked. Clara stood in the threshold, one hand resting on the frame for balance. Her cheeks were pale, her breath shallow. "You shouldn't be on your feet so long," Elias said, dropping the pitchfork. "You've been looking worn since we rode in. Let me—" Her knees buckled before he could finish. Elias lunged forward, catching her as she slumped against him. Her body trembled, and when he lifted her into the hay's soft cradle, he felt it, the swell beneath her dress, round and firm. The truth hit like a hammer. Elias staggered back, his chest rising and falling like a man after a gunfight. Lord above, "Clara." His voice cracked raw. You carry in?" Her eyes fluttered open, wide with panic. She clutched her stomach, as though shielding it from his gaze. I wanted to tell you," she whispered. "But if I had, you wouldn't have taken me." The barn filled with silence heavier than any storm. Outside, coyotes yipped in the distance, their cries echoing like laughter at a cruel joke. Elias's hands curled into fists. He turned away, staring at the slats of light bleeding through the barn wall. "Was another man's promise?" he asked finally, his voice low, hard. "Or just a mistake you thought I'd pay for?" Tears streaked Clara's dusted cheeks. "I had no choice. They left me with nothing but shame. I thought if I came here, if I worked, if I was quiet, you might not notice until we had made a life together." Her words trembled, breaking like glass on stone. Elias's heart thundered in his chest, torn between rage and pity. He thought of the last silver coin, the jeers in the saloon, the sheriff's warning. A fool, that's what they'd call him. Without another word, he shoved the barn door open and strode into the twilight. His boots struck the earth like gunshots. Clara's sobs followed him, faint against the prairie wind. The horizon burned blood-red as he mounted his horse. He didn't know where he was riding, only that he had to get away before the anger ate him alive. As the horse carried him into the fading light, Elias's mind churned with one truth that cut deeper than any knife. The bride he bought with his last dollar was already bound to another man. Chapter 4. Gunpowder and Shadows. The prairie night stretched wide and lonesome, moonlight spilling across Elias Boone's ranch like silver spill from a broken cup. Clara sat alone at the small kitchen table, the lamplight flickering across her face. Her hands trembled as she stitched a torn sleeve, though her mind wasn't on the needle. It was on Elias, gone for days now, leaving only silence and empty chairs behind. A knock rattled the cabin door. Too loud, too hard. Clara froze, clutching the fabric to her chest. "Elias?" she whispered, but she already knew it wasn't him. The door swung open before she could rise. A broad figure staggered in, stinking of whiskey. It was Burke, a ranch hand from the edge of town, his grin crooked with malice. "Well now," he drawled, slamming the door shut behind him. "Herb Boone bought himself a bride with his last coin. Shame he rode off and left you sitting pretty all alone." His boots scraped against the wooden floor as he stepped closer, eyes dark with hunger. Clara's heart hammered. She backed toward the stove, her hand brushing the iron poker resting by the fire. "Leave," she said, her voice sharper than she felt. "This ain't your place." Burke laughed, low and mean. "This whole town's been laughing at Boone. Fool's too blind to see what he paid for. But me? I don't mind taking sloppy seconds." He lunged forward, snatching at her wrist. The poker clattered as Clara raised it, striking his arm with desperate strength. Burke cursed, towering over her, fury flashing in his eyes. And then the door burst open. Elias stormed in, revolver drawn, eyes burning like coals in the lamplight. "Get your hands off her, Burke." His voice cracked like a whip, cold and steady. Burke sneered but loosened his grip. "Didn't think you'd crawl back so soon, Boone. Thought you were done with this little arrangement." Elias stepped forward, the revolver unwavering. "I was a fool to leave, but I won't be a fool standing by while some drunk lays hands on what ain't his." The two men squared off, the air thick with gunpowder tension. Burke's hand twitched toward his belt, but Elias was faster. The click of the hammer echoed like thunder. Burke froze, sweat trickling down his temple. "Get out," Elias said, voice low as the growl of a coyote. "Before I put you in the dirt." Burke spat on the floor, but he backed out slow, the door banging shut behind him. Silence followed, broken only by Clara's ragged breathing. She sank into the chair, tears spilling down her cheeks. Elias lowered the gun, setting it on the table with a heavy hand. "I should have been here," he murmured, shame cutting deep. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time saw not betrayal, but fear, strength, and a woman fighting to survive. The distance between them shrank, and though neither spoke of it, something shifted in that cabin. Something stronger than anger, forged in danger and shadow. Chapter 5. Hearts in the Dust. The prairie had quieted after Burke's departure, but the echo of his intrusion lingered in the cabin like smoke after a fire. Elias sat at the edge of the table, revolver resting heavy beside his hand, while Clara knelt near the hearth, her face turned away. The lamplight carved shadows across the room, and neither spoke for a long stretch, their silence louder than any storm. At last, Clara set aside the iron poker and pressed trembling fingers to her eyes. "You think me a liar," she whispered, voice breaking. "And perhaps I am. But I cannot keep it hidden any more." Elias's jaw clenched, though his heart beat uneven in his chest. "Then say it plain," he answered gruffly. "No more secrets." She turned to him, her eyes glassy with unshed tears, her shoulders straight despite their trembling. "The child is not yours. That much you know. But I did not come here to trick you, Elias. I came because I had nowhere else left." Her confession spilled out in halting words, like a wound that would not close. She spoke of a man back east, charming at first, promising marriage and a future. He left her instead with whispers, disgrace, and a belly that grew heavier with each passing month. No family would take her back. No church would bless her. The only hope was a paper bride, in a distant land where no one knew her shame. Elias listened, his rough hands folded tight before him. His chest ached at every word, but the anger he expected did not rise again. Instead, he saw the strength it took for her to speak, the courage to stand in her own ruin and not break. "You thought I'd turn you away," he said at last, his voice low. Clara nodded, tears finally slipping free. "I thought you'd cast me out the moment you knew. I would not have blamed you. Most men would have." The fire popped, scattering sparks into the chimney. Elias rose from his chair, his boots whispering against the floorboards as he crossed to her. He crouched, eye level with her for the first time. "I ain't most men," he said, the words gravel in his throat. His hand hovered before settling gently on hers. "You were wronged, Clara. That ain't your sin to carry. And I'll be damned if I let this land or its people punish you for it." Her lips quivered, and she searched his face as though testing if the promise was real. The tears fell faster then, but her shoulders eased, the weight of silence finally lifting. Outside, the wind stirred dust across the plains, but in the cabin there was a new stillness. One not born to despair, but of two souls fumbling toward trust. Chapter 6. The Man She Chose. Dawn broke soft and gold across the prairie, the sky blushing like a promise not yet spoken. Elias Boone saddled his horse in silence, the leather creaking beneath his hands. Dust clung to his boots, to his coat, to every breath he drew. Clara stood in the doorway of the cabin, the morning light painting her face pale and uncertain. "You don't have to stay here," Elias said without looking at her. His voice was gravel, steady but laced with hurt. "Stage runs east next week. You can be on it. Go back. Chase the life you were owed." Clara's hands clutched the frame so tight her knuckles whitened. "And if I did?" she asked softly. Elias pulled the reins tight, his jaw hard. "Then you'd be free of me. No one would laugh at you for carrying another man's child. No one would call you Boone's mistake." He finally turned, his eyes shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. "But if you stay, I can't promise you riches, Clara. All I got is this land, my two hands, and a heart I don't rightly know how to use." The words hung between them, raw and trembling, carried on the prairie wind. Clara stepped forward, the hem of her dress brushing the dusty ground. Her eyes glistened, but her chin lifted with the quiet strength of a woman who had already survived too much. "I didn't come here looking for riches, Elias. I came looking for a chance." Her voice cracked, and she placed a trembling hand over her belly. "This child may not be yours by blood, but I can't think of a better man to raise it than the one who put himself between me and a drunk with a gun." She swallowed, tears slipping free. "I don't want a man who left me behind. I want a man who came back." Elias froze, her words striking deeper than any bullet could. Slowly, he lowered the reins, his chest tight with something that was no longer anger. He stepped toward her, every sound magnified. The jingle of his spurs, the distant cry of a hawk, the whisper of wind in the grass. Clara met him halfway, when his callous hand cupped her cheek. She leaned into it, closing her eyes as if she'd been waiting her whole life for that touch. "Then stay," Elias said, his voice a vow. "Stay, and I'll see to it you're never left alone again. I'll raise this child as mine. And I'll love you, Clara, as steady as the sun sets over these plains." She pressed her lips to his, tasting dust, tears, and something fierce and new. The prairie spread endless around them, wide and wild, but for the first time neither felt lost. As the sun rose higher, Elias drew her close, one hand resting protectively on her belly. The man who'd spent his last dollar on hope had found something worth far more, a family forged not by chance, but by choice. The sun slid low over the plains, painting the sky in bruised shades of orange and violet. Dust swirled lazily in the cooling air, stirred by the steady rhythm of Elias Boone's horse as it carried him and Clara up the ridge behind their ranch. From there, the whole world seemed to stretch open. Fences, cattle, the lone cabin standing stubborn against the horizon. Clara sat behind him, her arms wrapped around his waist, her cheek resting against his back. She was no longer the frightened stranger who had stepped off a stagecoach, nor the woman hiding her shame. She was his, strong, unbroken, carrying life and hope inside her. Below them, the town stirred faintly, the echo of saloon music drifting like smoke on the wind. But out here, there was only silence, the hush of the land cradling them both. Elias dismounted and turned, helping Clara down. He held her hand, rough against delicate, and together they stood watching the day's last light bleed across the earth. "I spent my last dollar on a dream I thought was broken," Elias said, his voice thick but sure. He placed a hand gently on her rounded belly. "Turns out it bought me everything I never knew I needed." Clara's eyes shimmered, her lips trembling into a smile. "And you," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his, "you're the man I choose, today, tomorrow, and every sunset after." The wind carried the scent of sagebrush as he kissed her, long and steady, the kind of kiss that sealed promises stronger than any gun or coin. The prairie stretched wide, endless, dangerous, but for Elias and Clara, it was finally home.